Two networks, twice the power.
The Factor is about straight talk and challenging conventional wisdom. We dig deeper to get the truth behind the headlines and follow the money. What I'm talking about is getting to the heart of the problem and its impact on you. Whether it's politicians padding their wallets or outrageous legislation stealing from yours, we protect the viewer and we help protect your money. Oh, one more thing. There's no spin.
Fox News, the power to inform. Fox Business, the power to prosper.
Today, the Supreme Court is looking at a case that means a lot to homeschoolers and to libertarians: the ability to sue vaccine makers. Let's tackle that and more with my friend Jay Sekulow, Chief Counsel of the American Center for Law and Justice. Jay, it's always a pleasure. So what business,
you, Judge.
Thank you, what business is it of the federal government to say to people whose children have been injured by a vaccine that the government forced them to take, a vaccine that the parents didn't want them to take in the first place, you can't sue because over this injury to your child because we decided that the vaccine was safe?
You know, the irony of this, as you pointed it out, you look at a lot of people, there are a lot of people that are opposed to vaccines in principle, and sometimes it's on moral or religious grounds, other times it's just on scientific evidence. But the idea that the government would compel you to take a particular medication or vaccine and then say when you have adverse reactions to it, oh, by the way, you don't get to sue under a typical products liability claim, is ridiculous. The problem is that Congress writes these statutes without thinking that the consequences of this really do have constitutional significance.
Now, I've been talking,
back, you know,
I've been talking the whole show about this thing called Potomac fever. Libertarians and people that believe in the free market and believe in the Constitution get to Washington and something happens to them. This law was signed in 1986. Who was the liberal president that signed this in 1986?
Yeah,
the
great Ronald Reagan.
The great Ronald Reagan.
The great Ronald Reagan. Sometimes you don't get everything right. I mean, look, this thing. I remember when this was first debated, Judge. It was a long time ago, but I remember when this was first debated. And the very issues you've raised about Potomac fever are the issues that we were thinking. These people that we put in that are the conservatives, why would they do something to compel me to do something against my will? It's not much different than this whole health care debate we've had with that individual mandate. Again, compelling me to do something against my will.
Make for me,
Washington right now.
Make for me and for everybody listening to us the argument of the homeschoolers, the argument of the parents who believe that they know what's best for their children and the government can't force them to take a vaccine if they don't want it. Make that argument.
You know, in the perfect world, you'd have a situation where you'd have 14th Amendment due process rights, substantive due process, the idea that I'm not going to be put forward on this or put through this. Then you could look at even searches and seizures and those kind of issues. I mean, Fifth Amendment rights can come in, the right to be left alone. But how about the fundamental right of parents, constitutionally, to direct the upbringing of their children? The Supreme Court goes back, if you go back 120 years ago, a case involving that's called the Society of Sisters for Pierce. It's a very famous case. And they said, look, I mean, fundamentally, this is the parents' decision. But, you know, you look at the homeschooling situation, which, by the way, the law has been, in most of the states, very good now for the last decade. But it took 30 years of litigation, Judge, to get that law to respect these homeschooled kids and their parents. And now the schools, of course, the colleges and universities are dying to have these kids because they do so well academically.
I think you're going to have a result here where the court, with a couple of liberals and a couple of conservatives, says the parents have the right to sue because the government forced the kids to take that vaccine. Jay, we'll come back. We'll come back when the court comes down with its decision. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back. Oh, it may feel like everyone is against you some days, the government, the banks, whoever. But Glenn launched a 40-day, 40-night challenge on this program to inspire Americans to restore honor in their own lives. You heard about some of the amazing results on Friday when Glenn talked to an audience full of challenge takers. If you're still wondering if the challenge is for you, this may help you decide.
Today marks 40 days and 40 nights until 828. Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. The Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. Noah reigned 40 days, 40 nights. It's good cleansing time. So I want to ask you to join me on something. Make a commitment to do these three things for the next 40 days and 40 nights. Change your life. First one on faith. Pray. Find your relationship with God. Pray on your knees every night. The second thing is hope. Hope comes from truth. You can't expect honesty from others if you don't give it to them yourself. Stop all lies for the next 40 days. And the third one is charity. Remember that it begins at home. Do something kind for every member of your family at least once a week. Let's use these next 40 days and nights to prepare ourselves to show people who we really are. I gave a 40-day challenge on the air 40 days ago today. My challenge to you today is to make a choice. Does America go forward and the American experience expands, or does the experiment fail with us? If you pledge to yourself that you will restore honor in your own life, we will leave freedom better than how we found it.
Dear Glenn, charity is something I need more of, and the 40-day challenge has been a good wake-up call to me. By no small miracle, I found myself in attendance at 828. Me, just a guy from Montana with a wife and 3 kids. I could have floated off the National Mall that day. On that day, I started my 40-day challenge to get myself back where I need to be in my life. Brian Wilson, Corvallis, Montana.
My wife and very best friend in the world, I lost on August 16th after 39 years of marriage to breast cancer. I laid her to rest on the 27th, and your challenge gave me hope and focus, and God's love was there to catch me during my time of great sadness. I was able to challenge my sadness into hope by being on a bus the evening of the 27th and on the mall thanking God for what He was doing. I want to thank you, a voice crying in the wilderness for me. Bill Fairweather, Columbus, Ohio.
Since I've taken this challenge, I actually do find myself praying more. I pray for our troops and I pray for people in Washington to do the right thing. Faith, hope, and charity, I think it's basically made me a better man.
My name is Alton R. Brown. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm an ex-Marine. I remember taking an oath in front of Old Glory to give my life for this nation. And it's breaking my heart to see my nation basically going down the tubes. So I'm ready to serve my nation again in whatever capacity.
One man can change the world. That man or woman is you. You make the difference.
People are fed up with big government, fed up with politicians in both parties who think the government can right any wrong, regulate any behavior, and tax any event. Look at the mess big government has brought us. We are mired in a war in Afghanistan that is eerily reminiscent of the American disaster in Vietnam. Since the economic collapse of 2008, the federal government has borrowed and spent $2 trillion. The government says that only 15 million adults are out of work, but the number is more likely to be over 30 million. And whatever that number is, it is nearly the same as we're out of work before the $2 trillion was spent. Our national debt is rapidly approaching $14 trillion. That's the money that the government has borrowed and not yet repaid. And there is no end in sight and no plan as to how to pay it back. The Speaker of the House of Representatives said we need to give out more food stamps and more welfare because they're a good deal for the people who get them. And the President has been campaigning for Democrats all over the country. And his argument has been this: things could have been worse. Is it any wonder that many of the Democrats for whom he has been campaigning don't even want to be seen with him? What's wrong with the government today? Does the government tell the truth? No. Does the government break its own laws? Yes. Does the government write laws to keep itself in power? Of course it does. What we are witnessing today in America is the slow disintegration of the pillars of freedom. Can anyone seriously claim that Congress follows the Constitution? Can anyone seriously claim that the feds can cure a problem caused by too much borrowing and spending with more borrowing and spending? Is there any among us who thinks that the government would not hesitate for a moment to take our lives, our liberty, and our property without due process if it hated or feared us. We are halfway to socialism, and if we don't turn around this November, it will soon be upon us. We all know how horrible socialism is. The government owns the property, tells you what part is yours, puts you to work for it, and decides what you earn. And this is no joke and no exaggeration. Already, 47%, nearly half of Americans, receive their money from the government. Let me take that back. They receive their money from the remaining 53% of the taxpayers because the government takes that money from them and gives it away. And soon the government will tell them, those who receive it, how to spend it. Would you let a crook take your money and give it away? Would you let your neighbors take your money and give it away? Why do we let the government take our money and give it away? And think about this. After socialist governments take your money, they take your freedom. And no socialist government in history has ever respected the rights of its opponents. Just last week, a mere 15 minutes from where I am now sitting, a federal judge told the federal government it could not introduce evidence in a criminal trial that had been obtained under torture. Such an issue was unthinkable in an American courtroom 10 years ago. The people who have brought us this misery must be removed from office. However you vote in November, send those people home. From New York, defending freedom, good night, America.